Let me start with Governor Gilmore there and ask you a general question. As people who are political and know the mood of the country, starting with you, you've been a military man, you were in Army intelligence. But on this general question, the Rumsfeld removal was perhaps timed to the election. Do you think a general shakeup in this administration's cabinet right now would be good for the administration?
Well, Chris, I think there have been a lot of changes in the administration over the last number of years. We've seen those changes. But the fundamental point that we have to remember is this has been coming on for quite a long time. Decades this has been coming on. And I think that we got distracted at the end of the Cold War when we were thinking about the end of the Soviet Union and the fall of the Berlin Wall, thanks to the president in whose name this library is named. And instead, we didn't pay attention sufficiently to the entire Middle East. And I see this Iraq problem as part of an entire Middle East issue. And it's a fundamental problem that we're going to have an honest conversation with the American people about. We're going to have to engage in the Middle East, and we're going to have to do it for an extended and a long period of time. It isn't just an Iraq issue. This is an issue of the challenges that we're facing between the Palestinians and the Israelis, the challenge between Sunnis and Shiites, the problem with people on the street not even agreeing with their own regimes. There's a great deal that has to be done, and a president is going to have to bring the American people forward into a major commitment in many areas. One is foreign policy, and there'll have to be a new commitment to the Middle East.
John?
Congressman Paul, you voted against the war. Why are all your fellow Republicans up here wrong?
That's a very good question, and you might ask the question, why are 70% of the American people now wanting us out of there, and why did the Republicans do so poorly last year? So I would suggest that we should look at foreign policy. I'm suggesting very strongly that we should have a foreign policy of non-intervention, the traditional American foreign policy and a Republican foreign policy. Throughout the 20th century, the Republican Party benefited from a non-interventionist foreign policy. Think of how Eisenhower came in to stop the Korean War. Think of how Nixon was elected to stop the mess in Vietnam. How did we win the election in the year 2000? We talked about a humble foreign policy, no nation building, don't police the world. That is a conservative, it's a Republican, it's a pro-American, it follows the Founding Fathers, and besides, it follows the Constitution. I tried very hard to solve this problem before we went to war by saying, declare war if you want to go to war, fight it, and win it. But don't get into it for political reasons or to enforce UN resolutions or pretend the Iraqis were a national threat to us.
It's time. This is a question for Senator McCain. It's along those lines of intervention. Former Tennessee Senator Fred Thompson said that Iran has already committed acts of war. Do you agree? And secondly, as part of that, what's your tripwire for a U.S. strike at Iran?
Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism. We all know that. Iran continues their efforts to build nuclear weapons. Iran is now exporting lethal IEDs and jihadists and suicide bombers into Iraq, killing American soldiers. The Iranians encouraged Hezbollah to attack Israel from Lebanon recently. Iran poses one of the greatest threats to the world, the security of the world, and in the Middle East. I believe the Iranians we have got to bring greater pressures, diplomatic, economic, political, join with our European allies who still fear greatly the effect of the cutoff of oil into Europe. We have to work together. If the Russians and the Chinese are not helpful to us, then we had better figure out a way to put additional pressures encouraging democracy and freedom within Iraq, which is a very cultured society, within Iran, which is a very cultured society. At the end of the day, we cannot allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons.
Let me follow up a little bit, Senator.
Sure.
What is your tripwire? Is it the building of a nuclear weapon, the threat to use a weapon once built, a delivery system? Is it preemptive or preventive?
My greatest fear is the Iranians acquire a nuclear weapon and give it to a terrorist organization. And there is a real threat of them doing that. The tripwire is that if they acquire these weapons, and our intelligence tells us that this is a real threat to the state of Israel, to other states in the region. But I want to emphasize, Chris, there's lots of additional efforts that can be made and must be made before we consider that option. There's lots of things we can do. That is the ultimately final option, and I don't think we need to exercise it.